Welcome to my channel, where manga and anime stories come to life in audiobook form. Here you'll find manga-inspired adventures, anime-style fantasy, action-packed battles, dark mysteries, and emotional story arcs. From powerful heroes and crazy plot twists to supernatural worlds and unforgettable characters, there's always a new story waiting. If you've ever said just one more episode at 2 a.m., you'll fit right in. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Sal hadn't expected much when he signed up for the administration class. In a corner of his mind, he thought it would just be time spent reviewing what he had already learned from his father. However, within minutes of Jez opening his mouth, Sal was forced to admit he had been completely mistaken. The content was basic, but it possessed an entirely different depth. The only advantage Sal had over the other students was that he had to take fewer notes. Nevertheless, even on the first day, there was an abundance of things to learn. Do you know what the most valuable resource in this academy is? Information. Of course, you can chase after Q credits like the other kids, but doing that only puts you in competition with your cohort. But what if you have something no one else has? Your own unique ability, a peculiar training method, or something you discovered somewhere in the academy. You can trade things like that with other students multiple times. It creates recurring revenue, not just a one-time reward. You've seen crafters stuck in their workshops, working themselves to death to create a single masterpiece, right? But here's the thing, you can only sell that piece once. But what if you sell the blueprint? You can sell it to multiple crafters simultaneously, and the profits would be much larger. The production process, expertise, secrets, that's where the real value lies. Being able to snatch that up when the opportunity arises is something only possible if you become an information broker. Sal smiled as he organized his notes. He recalled the image of crafters hunched over in the workshop, sweating profusely as they immersed themselves in their work. Jez's perspective was surprising yet logical at the same time. Sal suddenly thought of Pavi Mackles. Sal had bought the tutorial video series she produced for 50 credits. When he thought about how many people might have purchased that video package and how much more profit she gained compared to doing each engraving or crafting job herself, his eyes widened. Sal began to formulate ideas for educational videos he could produce himself. He even thought, should I just sell blueprints for Q credits? Jez continued his explanation. Administration class is different from other classes. I hope you didn't register for this class with the mindset of coasting through the semester, because it will be a nightmare. The truly useful information will be revealed in later classes. But until then, you must earn your seat in those classes yourself. The students began to murmur. It starts today. I'll give you exactly 2 weeks to earn the qualification to enter the next level of class. Surely some kids will give up, complaining that it's unfair, saying the structure favors high rankers with lots of Q credits. I'm a fair man. I know exactly how many Q credits you all have, but that means nothing for this assignment. Everyone starts from the same line, and you must get ahead with your own abilities and wisdom. And if you break the rules, all the Q credits you've earned so far will be transferred to the other students who follow the rules, and you will have to report directly to me how you earned each credit. Now, I'll tell you various ways to earn Q credits, even if your abilities are mediocre. Has anyone heard of the credit floor above the workshop? Sal almost raised his hand. If you have commercially useful skills, they will hire you there on short-term contracts. You can also sell items you've crafted or traded. That's for high-end goods, but at your level, you can start by bartering with other students. There's an entire book on negotiation inside the folio, but we'll cover that in class later too. Starting a service business is one of the most profitable choices within the academy. Even in this space right now, there are few appraisers and restorers. Sal felt like he had been making eye contact with Jez for a while now. Those skills make money at first, but if you settle there, you'll soon be pushed aside by other kids. It's the same for crafters. If you stick to only one method, you'll be caught up quickly. So how should you grow? How? Before he knew it, Sal was drawn into Jez's way of speaking, inwardly asking for the answer every time he posed a question. Let's say you made a knife and earned 100 Q credits. You can make 3 knives a week, right? Maybe push yourself to make 4. That means you can earn a maximum of 400 credits per week, but how will you increase that? This time, Jez didn't answer. It didn't seem to be just a rhetorical question. So I'll try to think it over, but a few students raised their hands first. Can't you just make more expensive weapons? Jez shook his head and pointed to another student with their hand up. Since a crafter's skills improve over time, can't you just raise the price of the knife? Jez waved his hand lightly and said with a playful expression, good try, but no. Several answers followed, but all were rejected. Then, a thought suddenly occurred to Sal. He raised his hand and Jez pointed at him. What if you outsource the production and take a commission? Jez clapped his hands and pointed precisely at Sal. That's it. For example, let's say a certain crafter makes knives so well that there's high demand. What happens if that crafter outsources the production and just attaches their name to it? Customers still pay 100 Q credits to buy the knife, and that crafter can pay the outsource maker a certain fee and still have plenty left over. That's the power of a brand. Sal recalled the many people who thought of the auction house as soon as they heard his name. This is the power of a brand. For example, I wouldn't hesitate at all to entrust my most cherished weapon to the Argento auction house. Jez gestured toward his bladed staff lying on the desk, then raised a hand towards Sal, who was sitting embarrassedly in his seat. Then he pointed to another student and said he only rides cars from that student's family brand, and praised another student's family restaurant as the best. Like that, Jez rattled off the families and specialties of over 10 students. Sal wasn't the only one surprised. Many students in the room looked at him with astonished expressions. This is the power of a brand. Create your own brand at Quest Academy. A brand of your own, out from under your family shadow. Of course, that might be premature. Money, information, and brand. These three elements will be truly critical standards for your success going forward. Jez took a sip of water at the podium and continued. Even while I'm speaking here, I'm earning credits. Because I invested in a few guilds active in the red zone. There was some emotional judgment in why I invested in them. They were almost expelled due to a lack of credits. On the other hand, I had Q credits overflowing. Now, let me point out the important part here. Because I had Q credits, I could buy the next semester for students about to be expelled and save them. Because I had Q credits, I could buy minority stakes in more than 5 graduate guilds. 2 of them have already risen to initiate status. Because I have Q credits, I can pick any of these towers, look down at the world, and take a piss. Because for those with Q credits, even the rules bow their heads. For Sal, the remaining hours passed in the blink of an eye. He realized deep in his heart that this would become his favorite class. Sitting on the edge of his desk, Jez literally did exactly what he said he would. Every student leaving the classroom was inspired by him, contemplating how to tackle the next assignment. Sal's imagination was also burning brightly. He realized that possessing all 3 abilities, appraisal, restoration, and crafting, put him in an excellent position to gather initial capital. He could create blueprints to sell repeatedly, and there was much to consider from a branding perspective as well. Sal felt the urge to contact his father and find out more about Jez. Since Jez seemed to know about his family, his father would likely know about Jez too. Just a few steps after class ended, he heard some students talking about the party being held this evening. The party! Excited by the administration class. He had completely forgotten about the party, but he didn't deliberate for long. He quickly organized the situation in his mind. There was enough time to participate in both the workshop and the party. Right now, his Q credits had been reset to 0, and he wanted to make a deep impression on Jez. Through the stories he heard today, he realized that the Q credit system meant more than just simple currency. The fact that it was an asset that wielded power not only within the academy, but even in the world beyond completely shifted his perspective. Sal had no regrets about the Q credits he had spent so far, but he was now firmly determined to earn rather than spend. Jez had taught them how to take the first step toward financial independence, and Sal possessed more resources than anyone else in that class. That was why he wanted to show even more that he was not someone who settled. Jez already knew Sal's potential, and Sal wanted to exceed those expectations. The workshop was busy as always, but he saw many unfamiliar faces. Most seemed to be first years. Porge was moving between groups explaining this and that, and Sal realized that he was ahead of schedule in grasping the workshop system. The silver cohort hadn't even taken the intro to crafting class yet. Upgrade was nowhere to be seen, but a few regular crafters who usually kept their spots were still there. When a few of them looked up at Sal, he nodded and greeted them. But Sal didn't linger and walked straight toward the elevator heading to the credit floor. As the doors opened, a few people shouted wishing him luck, and Sal smiled and waved his hand before standing in the space, moving 2 floors up as the doors closed. He was headed to the floor where the beautiful auction house was located. Fortunately, Vanessa was not in sight. Both she and the receptionist on duty at the time would know him as a mythos crafter. There was a general store on the first floor, but according to the map, the space for commission work was set up separately in individual booths located on the left. A woman in uniform glanced at him with a puzzled expression, but Sal handed her the silver token he had received from Vila. Are there any appraisal requests I can handle right now? Sal spoke with a confident tone. This was his stage, and he knew this world better than anyone. After all, he had lived his entire life mingling with people like this. The woman checked the token and gave a gentle smile. Yes. You are registered as an anonymous request. Is it alright if I don't call you by name? She spoke politely and gestured for Sal to follow. I'll guide you to a private booth. Are you okay with meeting the Reavers Guild directly? They arrived a little while ago and have finished the initial inspection. Sal nodded, and the woman continued her explanation. Usually we have items waiting for appraisal ready, but this time we distributed some requests to external appraisers. Would you be willing to personally re-examine the appraisals they did? Sal laughed and shook his head. Not if it's for free. If you handed it over to external appraisers because you didn't want to entrust it to me, then they should bear the cost too. The woman's smile stiffened slightly, but she opened the door and spoke calmly. I'll inform the Reavers Guild that you've arrived. Once the work is done, please fill out all the appraisal documents. It's necessary for settlement. With that, she left, and Sal was left alone in a bright booth with a comfortable leather sofa, a refreshment area, and, most importantly, a large work table with well-organized appraisal tools. Sal raised the corners of his mouth and activated his ability. Everything he needed had been given to him. Sal looked around the room, admiring the facilities of the space. He suddenly wondered if the woman in the uniform knew that he could fill out the appraisal documents himself. Did she intentionally make him ask for help to lower his status? Whatever it was, Sal thought the less he got entangled with the staff on this credit floor, the better. He didn't have to wait long. There was a knock on the door on the other side of the room, and Sal answered for them to come in. Surprisingly, the first person to enter was a man in a uniform. His face lit up as soon as he saw Sal, and he stepped aside. And behind him, the real customers entered. In dealings at the Argento auction house, Sal mostly encountered businessmen. Agents, managers, sponsors, people like that came to collect items or entrust appraisals for their teams. Many of them bought equipment out of vanity rather than for practical use. Distinguishing such people was a skill in itself, and his father, Pietro, had advised him to always talk up the equipment's performance to make it seem flashy when dealing with such customers. Scanning the people entering the room, Sal made an immediate judgment. That method wouldn't work this time. These were not people collecting items, but people who intended to use them. Are you serious? He's just a kid, the man at the front said, looking back at the uniform man. More than the remark itself, Sal was curious about how the guide would react next. If he asked to check the silver token again right here, it would severely undermine Sal's professionalism. Conversely, if he stopped the guild member, it would be proof that this place truly trusted him. In that fleeting moment, the guide hesitated briefly, then nodded and approached Sal. Excuse me, but would it be okay if I check your token again? Sal raised one eyebrow and said, No, you already checked it before I entered. Sal pointed chin toward the door. Go tell Vila that entrusting this job to me was a mistake. Would you like to check it yourself? The guide froze on the spot. Then he carefully turned his head and apologized to the guild member. I apologize for the confusion. We have already completed the identity verification. The guild member smirked, looked Sal up and down once, and turned back to the guide. You heard him. Go ask Vila if this kid is really a big deal. Although it was a joke, the guild member continued to pressure the staff member playfully, eventually waving his hand to dismiss him. In the meantime, Sal began to examine the first guild member. He was holding a long object wrapped in a thick blanket. He was tall and well-built, wearing what appeared to be custom-made metal breastplate. There was some form of leather padding on his arms, which Sal guessed was for mobility and flexibility. The helmet held in his other arm had a built-in targeting device attached, and with just this information, Sal surmised the possibility that he was a ranged combatant. You survived meeting Vila? You must be quite skilled. The guild member burst into laughter and placed the blanket-wrapped equipment on the table. Then he took a step back. Sal felt from that action that they were people who observed basic etiquette. Behind him, a woman wrapped in black leather from head to toe was staring piercingly at him. Two belts, crossing diagonally over her chest, held throwing daggers neatly in place. When the woman unzipped her top slightly to reveal her figure, Sal hurriedly looked away. Another guild member snorted. Trying to get a discount? The woman retorted with a playful grin. Just thought it was a bit hot. Sal looked away and observed the remaining guild members. He was here to work, not to joke around. He didn't want to be disturbed, and she was a distraction. He exhaled lightly and began to slowly unwrap the blanket. It took 3 turns before the equipment inside was revealed, and Sal was momentarily speechless the moment he saw it. It contained a sniper rifle he hadn't expected. This didn't drop from a dungeon. Sal chuckled and began to slowly circle the sniper rifle. Is there any specific part you need checked? He turned his head to look at the sniper, but the Reaver's guild member said nothing. That's for you to tell me, young friend. At this, Sal activated his eyes in earnest. Looking closely at the sniper rifle, several surprising pieces of information popped up at once. He had appraised various equipment before, but now with the added ability of a mythos crafter, the aspect was completely different. All the parts making up the sniper rifle appeared separated, as if in an exploded view. Some parts had fundamental flaws, but others felt surprisingly sophisticated. There was also something unexpected. Sal could not only recall the blueprint to craft this sniper rifle himself in his mind, but also see how the design could be improved. Sal naturally thought of Jez's class. If he could create and sell blueprints of weapons appraised in this way separately, perhaps he could earn continuous profit by selling them to other crafters. Sal circled the sniper rifle one more time and smiled. Name, Maslow Sniper Rifle. Source, crafted. Age, 28 years. Rank, rare, high. Dimensions, 58 in, 24 pounds. Material, gunmetal alloy, dune pearl, essence steel, essence iron. Properties, target lock. Grant a chance to apply a target lock effect on the target. Headshot. Small chance to apply a critical hit on headshots. Stabilization. nullifies some range penalties, and slightly increases range. Lucky bullet. 1 out of 3 bullets is enhanced with essence, causing a critical hit effect. Abilities: target lock, headshot, stabilization, lucky bullet. Power source: external essence. Evolution potential: none. Quality low. Durability: 43%. Estimated value: $65,000, $110,000. Are you by chance Maslow? Sal asked, and at those words, the sniper straightened his posture. Yeah, how did you know? Sal didn't answer and continued speaking while looking at the gun. This weapon has been remanufactured at least 3 times. The barrel was originally taken from an epic rank weapon, and every third bullet is infused with a barrier capable of piercing almost anything. The problem is with this barrel, that effect should normally apply to every bullet. The scope is uncommon rank, but the helmet's visor is probably compensating for that part. Sal pointed to the helmet the guild member was holding. Just as the guild member raised an eyebrow and was about to say something, Sal cut him off and continued. The pistol grip and trigger are also uncommon, so there must be moments when the bullet doesn't fire even when you pull the trigger. Overall, there's absolutely no harmony between the parts, so the accuracy is bound to drop. Sal circled the gun one more time and sighed. If you want to sell this, you'd be better off disassembling it by part and selling them separately. Or if you want to use it in a fight, you need to change the pistol grip, trigger, and firing mechanism entirely. The barrel and stock are fine, but to use this properly, you'll need to replace the scope with a better one too. Like I said, high rare rank is likely the ceiling for this weapon. When Sal looked up, complex emotions were crossing Maslow's face. Usually, clients would argue about the authenticity of parts to raise the price or refute the claims at this point, but Maslow didn't. The barrier fires once every 2 shots. But how did you determine it fires every 3? Sal pointed a finger toward his chest and said, the only variable is you. Are you perhaps injecting essence yourself before loading the bullets? Maslow smiled. Well, something like that. Then he nodded to the other guild members behind him with a satisfied smile. Sal waited for the next appraisal item, but Maslow didn't seem finished yet. He placed both hands on the table and looked back and forth between the sniper rifle and Sal. I took this to 3 different workshops, including this one. All 3 did a remanufacture for me. The barrel and stock were taken from my father's gun, but the scope, trigger mechanism, and grip are 3 new parts, 1 replaced. Are you saying they ruined it all? Sal nodded. If this was originally an epic rank weapon, yes. They completely ruined it. Dropping from epic to high rare might not seem like a big difference, but this falls far short of its original level. Even a Mythos crafter would find it hard to restore this to its former performance. Sal made a serious face at the guild member and gestured for the next person to come forward. Then the sniper raised his hand to stop his friend. Wait, Mythos crafter? Does such a thing exist? Sal looked at him as if he were strange. Really? You haven't heard the rumors about him yet? The credit floor signed a contract with him earlier this week. He restored an epic rank piece of equipment with his bare hands. Seeing their eyebrows raise, Sal went a step further. I'm handling some of his equipment appraisals, and it's quite interesting. I thought he was just a restorer, but he crafts epic rank items himself too. The sniper nodded at the woman sitting on the sofa, and she acted as if she understood immediately. Leaving only a trail of black smoke, she disappeared from her seat in an instant. Sal was about to continue speaking, but felt his throat choke up for a moment as the guild member looked back at him. Mythos crafter. I'll remember that name. Thanks. By the way, who are you? Sal extended his hand and took out the silver token Vila had given him from his pocket. I'm Salvatore Argento. A look of recognition flashed across the guild member's face for a moment. You're the young master of the Argento auction house. Sal nodded and smiled. I want to be recognized for my own skills. If you have more equipment to appraise and the budget is okay, I can still work for a few more hours. The guild member grabbed Sal's hand and shook it. You probably saw the engraving Maslow on the gun, but everyone calls me Watcher. I've heard plenty of weirder nicknames than that. In an instant, black smoke exploded and a leather-clad rogue reappeared. She was holding the guide from earlier, who looked terrified and extremely uncomfortable. The roguelike guild member released him, as if tossing him aside, and gestured toward Watcher. You handle him. Sal cautiously took a step back. The thought occurred to him that she might be a teleporter. Watcher nodded and waved his hand over his shoulder. Blink, this is Sal. He's a trustworthy guy, at least compared to people who ignore him because he's young. Blink tilted her head, looking at Sal, and narrowed her eyes as if Sal were an object for appraisal. Between her black lipstick, the corners of her mouth slowly turned up into a smile. Nice to meet you. Here, appraise this. Before Sal could react, Blink stood right in front of his eyes, holding an ornately decorated dagger. The dagger was held precariously just above her chest, near Sal's neck. It was clearly an action intended for shock value, but Sal was mesmerized by the blade and couldn't take his eyes off it. Blink glanced at Watcher and laughed. I can't tell if he's looking at my body or the knife right now. Watcher shrugged. Either way, seems like he has an eye for things. Meanwhile, the guide seemed to have finally grasped the situation again, rolling his eyes around before finding his footing. Being teleported by a guild member didn't seem like something he was used to. It seemed Blink had given him a prior explanation, and the guide tried to speak about procedures and liability issues, but Watcher silenced him by raising a single hand. Anyway, that's all good, and I want a Mythos crafter take a look at this gun. Got it. Vila will cover the cost. The administrative staff member nodded repeatedly, seemingly grateful, and hurriedly left the room. Sal took the dagger from Blink and carefully turned it over in his hands. Name, Siphon Blade. Source, Portal Relic. Age, unknown. Rank, Epic High. Dimensions, total length 14 in, blade 9.25 in, hilt 4.75 in. Material, vampire blood, fairy ether, hellfire titanium. Properties, absorption. The blade absorbs all possible essence from both the target and the user. Vital Strike, automatically targets the opponent's vital points. Serrated Edge, inflicts severe additional damage if pulled out while embedded in the body. Slash, pierces most defenses when used in a slashing motion. Abilities, Absorption, Vital Strike, Serrated Edge, Slash. Power Source, targets essence. Evolution Potential, yes, 58% to Legend rank. Quality, excellent. Durability, 85%. Estimated value, $180,000, $240,000. This is a truly decent epic rank weapon. It gets stronger the more essence it absorbs. Sal looked at Blink with an excited expression and smiled brightly. See this here? This line flowing along the blade, this is proof that it's absorbing essence. Didn't you feel tired holding this all day? Sal shook his head side to side and returned the dagger to Blink. She took it awkwardly, looking flustered. I was always a bit exhausted after a battle. You're saying it's because of this knife? Sal nodded. He understood because he had a similar experience due to the shirt he had crafted before. It's an essence glutton. If it were simply an artifact with high essence consumption, I'd recommend engraving a self-recharging inscription, but doing that to this would completely ruin it. If you keep letting the absorbed essence accumulate while fighting like you do now, it will evolve into a legend rank. My guess is the transition point will come after just a few more months of fighting, so please show me later. Blink looked at Sal with a face full of surprise, then smiled broadly and looked him up and down. How old are you, kid? I'm not a kid. I'm an adult. At that moment, Watcher spun around and pointed a finger at Blink. Don't you dare touch the appraiser. Sal couldn't help but burst into laughter with the guild members. Previously, the Reavers Guild had always been a source of tension, whether due to their name or Vila's reputation. But seeing them exchange jokes and laugh heartily like this, they didn't seem so terrifying. Of course, there was no doubt that if necessary, they could wipe away that cheerfulness and transform into fearsome warriors. Sal just had to focus on his own work. If he did, he could earn Q credits and build trust with them. Through the small talk, Sal learned that Watcher was one of the guild's team leaders and Blink and Trench were his seniors. Although most of the loot had already been appraised, it seemed they wanted to show off some of the top-tier equipment they possessed after hearing rumors that Sal was a talent who had received a silver token. Trench belonged to the Defender class and requested an appraisal of his boots. To Sal, it was a simple issue. The quality of the laces was poor, so the boots were nearly bursting open after every battle. Trench wasn't exactly friendly or talkative, and perhaps his personality was a bit prickly. Judging by his tone and attitude, Sal didn't want to spend much time with him. He certainly wasn't the cheerful type like Blink or Watcher. Overall, the Reavers Guild members seemed satisfied with Sal's appraisal skills, and Sal conversed with them for quite a long time. Sal told them that if they wanted to commission an appraisal in the future, they should designate him by name during the evening hours after class. If they wanted an in-person appraisal, he told them it would have to be done in the workshop downstairs from now on, and the guild members readily accepted the condition. After they left, Sal filled out all the documents and recorded the time spent on each appraisal. He rounded the time to the nearest whole number and signed his name at the end. Instead of following the guild members to the VIP area, Sal opened the door on the opposite side of the appraisal room and returned to the hallway, heading back the way he came. Greeting him again was the woman in uniform, wearing her practiced smile as usual. Sal handed her the completed documents, and she raised an eyebrow slightly upon checking the ranks of the equipment, but said nothing. She nodded and processed the request, then asked for his cue card for identity verification. But Sal held out the token instead and requested that the deposit be made to his student account. He didn't want to reveal the information that he was a Mythos crafter displayed on his cue card. She hesitated briefly, but soon skipped the standard procedure and proceeded. After everything was processed, she handed him a document explaining the commission fees taken by the credit floor. It was the cost for renting the facility and room here. While the conditions themselves were standard, the amount was clearly excessive. Sal suddenly felt relieved that he had already told the Reavers Guild to meet him on the workshop floor from now on. Sal pointed to the commission items specified in the document. I I've arranged to meet them in the workshop from now on. I'll leave these high-end rooms to the more experienced appraisers. Can I pay here, or do I need to go to another desk? Her smile stiffened slightly, seemingly conscious of the lost rental income, but she still responded professionally. The client has already completed the payment. Watch her and blink left a separate tip as well. There was also a note telling you to buy some new clothes for the party tonight. She handed him a folded receipt across the desk. Normally, it was customary to check it after leaving the auction house, but Sal didn't want to lose out on his first transaction, so he unfolded the paper to check the amount immediately. Sal glanced at the final number and was surprised to see that he had earned 376 Q credits for 2 hours of work. He recalled Jez using the example of a blacksmith earning 400 Q credits a week as doing well. Considering that figure felt almost like an ideal goal during class, Sal's earnings today were certainly impressive. However, he decided not to get conceited. He folded the paper and put it away, offered a thank you to the receptionist along with a sincere smile and a fake "see you next time," then headed down the hallway toward the elevator. Just then, Vanessa emerged from the shadows. The relief on her face made it seem as if Sal had saved her from a desperate crisis. "Ah, you received the message. I didn't expect you to come so quickly." Vanessa clasped her hands together and stood in front of Sal, speaking breathlessly. Perhaps because the day was coming to an end, she had taken off her blazer at some point and was now wearing a form-fitting blouse. Her appearance was enough to distract Sal. "Actually, a request came in from Mythos. We haven't even properly introduced you to our team yet, and the internal procedures aren't fully finished. But this is a bit urgent, so I was wondering if you could take it on early." Vanessa's smile was desperate, and a small sliver of sympathy bloomed in a corner of Sal's heart. If only it had been another man instead of her who came to find him, the negotiation would have been much easier. He sighed inwardly and pointed to the elevator. "I'm really sorry. I came up earlier because I had a meeting with an Argento appraiser, and tonight I have a party with other students. I really don't have time these days. I want to help so much, but—" Sal spread his hands to show his helplessness. "It's not a lie. Talking to myself counts as a meeting. The most advantageous position in a negotiation is not making the first offer yourself." Now that he had presented his constraints, it was time for Vanessa to dig into that gap. To be honest, Vanessa was very skilled. She tucked her hair behind one ear and gave Sal a meaningful smile. It is quite a difficult situation. Would it still be impossible if I asked like this?" Vanessa's posture shifted slightly. It seemed she was trying to pressure Sal with her charming atmosphere. "Actually, a batch of cores arrived yesterday. Once inspection is finished, some of them were designated for Mythos from shipment due in 2 weeks. But if you start this job early now, I could give you those cores early too, right?" Honestly, it was a quite tempting offer for Sal, but he wanted to see what else Vanessa would put on the table besides this offer. Vanessa leaned in close and whispered in his ear, "It's a job connected to the Reavers Guild. They pay quite generously to talented people. If you ask the appraiser you met earlier, you'll know." Her voice tickled Sal's ear like a song. "If you take this job, I'll promote Mythos heavily to every guild that comes our way from now on. I can also sneak you some extra cores." And she slowly turned her head to face Sal. Anticipation sparkled in her eyes. "Consider it me owing you one. How about it?" Sal nodded. He had intended to take the job on that gun anyway, and everything Vanessa mentioned afterward was a bonus. Cores, introductions to each guild, and the unbearable tension. "All right, let's make a contract. And don't worry about the debt. I look forward to working together in the future," Sal said with the most sincere smile he could muster. He needed to maintain a good working relationship with her. The moment he looked like a puppy in love, everything could fall apart. So Sal willingly played the role of a naive crafter who didn't yet know his own worth. Vanessa seemed unexpectedly delighted. "Thank you so much." Sal was flustered when she suddenly hugged him, and he quickly pulled away before his body could react contrary to both his promise to himself and the negotiation. With a gesture of thanks, Sal backed away toward the elevator, but he could still see her through the transparent wall. As the elevator began to descend, Vanessa smiled brightly and deliberately approached the door to wave. While going down, Sal looked up at her. She was clearly showing that she still held the upper hand. Looking at Vanessa, posing as if telling him to look at her a little longer, Sal almost felt disgusted with himself, because he was displeased with himself for fixing his gaze on her, just as she intended. Sal lightly tagged his cue card to enter the blueprint room. Upgrade had granted Sal access to this place only after explaining the rules for a long time. Arbitrarily modifying existing blueprints was prohibited, and copying or altering advanced concepts required her permission. She wanted Sal to demonstrate his skills to the fullest, but for now, she wanted him to learn techniques through repetition and practice. "Sal, you'll have plenty of opportunities to participate in various projects in the future. Large projects that will bring positive change to society." Recalling Upgrade's words, Sal picked up blank blueprint paper and sketching tools from the stationery set placed by the door. He sat at one of the workbenches and switched the table to his profile. The first thing that caught his eye was the drone, but he put that aside for later and opened a new file. The table surface turned into a clean white sheet, ready for sketching. Sal recalled Blink's dagger, reviving the memory as vividly as possible, and immediately began drafting. He didn't know how it was possible, but the threads of essence that flowed through the dagger were visible to Sal's eyes just as they were. With ordinary items, he could see how to improve performance or upgrade them, but this dagger was completely different. The story of its evolution, starting from common rank, through uncommon, rare, and now to epic rank, unfolded before his eyes. Following the process of transformation through each rank like a chronicle, Sal was witnessing that evolution with his eyes. Sal recorded every dimension, material, and the runes and engravings carved on the blade without omission. Somehow, his eyes now seemed to possess the ability to recall every detail of an object, and Sal was able to transfer that information accurately onto paper. There were elements, like some of the runes, that he didn't understand individually yet, but through his eyes, he knew that when those runes intertwined and harmonized, they granted evolutionary characteristics to the item. The possibility of creating evolutionary equipment brought immense excitement to Sal. But to maintain it, a powerful core was absolutely necessary. Sal suddenly wondered what would happen if he left Blink's dagger in the core storage. Would the dagger absorb essence from the surrounding cores and continue to evolve? Or would it stay dormant until someone picked it up? He looked over the energy consumption calculations he had written down. If I try to make this weapon even a little bigger, I'll need a massive amount of essence and a core to match. In the end, he reached the conclusion that the dagger itself might be the most suitable form for evolutionary characteristics. Although his mind was briefly distracted by countless imaginations, Sal's hands didn't stop for a single moment. His blueprint had already reached a level where another crafter could replicate it exactly. But for Sal, that wasn't enough. He continued to make adjustments and revisions according to the image of the dagger drawn in his mind. The Mythos crafter ability tried to suggest modifications to the dagger intermittently, but Sal suppressed it. He intended to perfectly recreate the dagger first before using his ability to apply variations. In less than a few minutes, Sal entered a state of complete immersion. Refining the blueprint, he reproduced every scratch and flaw that existed on Blink's epic rank dagger. Once he completed a blueprint capable of perfectly replicating the dagger, Sal took a deep breath, smiled, and activated his Mythos crafter ability. At that moment, the blueprint began to change before his eyes. Sal first saved the perfect replica he had made so far, and then began to create a new, enhanced version on top of it. His logic was simple. If this epic rank dagger was the result of evolution, could he also design the ranks preceding it? Based on his new abilities, what if he created a dagger with a better evolutionary path from the start? Rather than spending immense time and resources to create a Mythos rank weapon, he concluded that creating a growth-type weapon capable of evolving into Mythos rank was more realistic. Following the guidance shown by his eyes, Sal improved each part of the blueprint one by one. Thoughts of the party had long vanished from his mind, but there was still plenty of time to attend anyway. Sal panted heavily as he finally returned to the dormitory. He had poured so much time into his blueprint work that Upgrade had poked her head into the room and asked if he planned on living there for the rest of his life. Sal had wanted to run out right then and there, but Upgrade held him back, insisting on reviewing the blueprint he was drawing together. Thanks to that, it took up quite a bit of time, but in return he received incredible feedback from Upgrade. It was clear she was deeply interested in the project Sal was working on. Upgrade, I'm sorry. I really don't have time. Sure, I'll just wither away in the workshop with my old friends. Sal left the workshop without being able to retort. As he headed toward the circular auditorium, countless first-year students had already gathered to enjoy the party. I'm late. Arriving in his room, Sal quickly moved to open his wardrobe and find something that looked as decent as possible. It was finally a chance to see people as something other than gray blobs, so he couldn't mess it up. Trying on black slacks made him feel like he was going for an interview, and trying on white pants just made him anxious about spilling something. Ugh, what should I wear? Most of his clothes were gray to match his eye color, but now that gray was the same color as the school uniform, it was the worst option. Damn it, I don't know. Let's pick a top first. A white shirt should be safe. Just as he picked up the shirt, he paused, smelling himself. The shirt fell to the floor, and Sal muttered a curse as he ran to the bathroom. It was a miracle he didn't cut himself while shaving. Glancing in the mirror, Sal noticed his hair starting to grow unruly and vowed to get a haircut soon. Suddenly curious, Sal activated his Mythos crafter ability, and his gray eyes turned a brilliant purple. Since maintaining the ability took almost no effort, he briefly considered whether it was worth keeping these eyes throughout the party. But he shook his head, deactivated the ability, and headed back to the wardrobe. White shirt, gray V-neck sweater, roll up the sleeves. Good, collar open. Done. Sal muttered as he got dressed. Then his eyes sparkled at the answer that appeared before him. In jeans. Checking himself 3 times in front of the mirror, Sal finally opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. It was already late, but at least he wasn't in his gray uniform anymore. Sal felt satisfied with his appearance for the first time in a while and wondered what others would look like in their casual clothes. After closing the door and checking that he had his cue card, he walked toward the elevator. Sal, hurry up, before someone takes me away. Hannah waved and called out to Sal with a laugh. She had spotted him before he had even taken 2 steps down the stairs of the circular auditorium. Beside her, a male student with a serious expression was holding several plastic cups. But before he could descend the stairs fully, Divinity called him from the left. Sal, there's someone I want to introduce you to. Sal was completely caught off guard seeing Divinity in casual clothes. The uniform really was the problem. She wore a short crop top and jeans, completing the style with leather boots that came up to her knees and a striking leather jacket. The person standing next to her was someone Sal had never seen before. A mysterious girl with black hair, cold blue eyes, and the best poker face Sal had ever seen. She wore a black skirt that came down to her ankles and a top that looked like a corset combined with a white shirt, strangely giving off the vibe of a pirate undertaker. Divinity beckoned him closer with an even brighter smile. As Sal approached, the pirate undertaker-like girl looked at the two of them with a weary expression. You know, it's weird enough that you're talking to me, but I'm not interested in your friend either. Can't you just leave me alone? If annoyance could be personified, this girl was it. Divinity tried to soothe her and gave Sal a pleading look. Melanie, this is Sal. Sal, this is Melanie. All the puzzle pieces fit together instantly. Sal stepped forward intending to offer a handshake, but stopped upon seeing Melanie's expression. She looked extremely uncomfortable with the situation, as if ready to explode at any moment. Realizing this, Sal changed his strategy. Divinity, did you happen to tell Melanie about that vision? Sal looked back and forth between the startled Divinity and Melanie, who suddenly showed curiosity. I'm really sorry, Melanie. Actually, we weren't sure if we should talk about this, but since Divinity met you here today, maybe it's fate? Sal tried to soothe Melanie's suspicion while stimulating her curiosity. Judging by her expression, she definitely seemed to want to know more. Melanie uncrossed her arms, tilted her head to one side, and frowned. What vision are you talking about? Sal put on a troubled expression as if he didn't want to say. Raising the tension for a few seconds, he finally let out a deep sigh and acted as if he was reluctantly revealing it. The corners of Divinity's mouth began to lift slightly. Sal gestured for Melanie to sit in the spectator seats, and he sat down as well. Divinity went down to the seats on the lower level instead of sitting between them, kneeling on the seat to look up at the two. Meeting Melanie's gaze, Sal chose his words carefully. We saw a few visions about the future, and in many cases, the beginning was similar. You start hearing certain voices and think you're going crazy. You can't focus on daily life and can't get any work done. Melanie's eyes widened, and Sal added a few of his guesses as if he had seen them. You feel like you don't belong in this academy, and you think your ability isn't strong enough to be a hero, right? Melanie straightened her shoulders and put on a flustered expression as if she might crumble at any moment. Her eyes darted busily between Sal and Divinity, and she opened her mouth almost in a whisper. Do I hurt someone in the future? Her fear was blatantly obvious to anyone watching. Sal could tell she was imagining all sorts of terrible futures from just that one sentence, running through countless scenarios in her head. With this kind of reaction, it was understandable why she would self-destruct in the future. Sal slowly shook his head and smiled reassuringly. In the worst future, you get expelled, keep hearing voices, and eventually get swept up in it. There are many casualties, both human and monster, and you become one of the most powerful dangers in the city. He paused for a moment, observing her reaction. It was a look of disbelief. He didn't know which part caused that reaction, but Sal continued his story. But there's also a future where everything works out. You enter the savior class and learn to handle your ability properly. In that future, you save thousands of people and eventually become one of the greatest heroes in history. Divinity pointed at Sal with her chin. He's rank 19, and I'm rank 2. We've seen everything that happens in the coming months and years. This semester is the worst for evaluating your ability. That's why you end up getting expelled. What? Then, if you join us, you'll rise to the top of the class and even enter the red zone before the semester ends. Sal frowned slightly, and Melanie looked at Divinity with terror-filled eyes. Enter the red zone? Are you crazy? Judging that simple comfort or persuasion wouldn't soothe her, Sal changed direction to stimulate her curiosity again. Melanie, do you want to know what your ability is? Melanie's anger, which was about to explode, subsided in the blink of an eye. She looked at Sal with wide eyes and asked in a voice that couldn't hide her hope. You know my ability? Sal nodded and shifted his posture slightly. I don't know what's written on your cue card, but it's probably a weak version of your true ability. Melanie nodded, took out her cue card, and handed it to Sal. It says Spirit Medium. but there's no record of such an ability. Sal confirmed that she was taking analysis classes. Among the modules she chose, nothing was related to that field. It was her obvious mistake. He returned the cue card to her and said, "Spirit medium is partly correct. Your ability is necromancy, the power to handle the dead. As you get stronger, you'll be able to bring those voices to your side." Sal looked at her carefully, hoping Melanie wouldn't have a mental breakdown. But unexpectedly, a broad smile bloomed on her face. "I can control the dead, and the voices in my head aren't, because I'm crazy." As Sal and Divinity nodded, Melanie let out a deep sigh of relief. "I really thought I was crazy. Then, what do I have to do to not end up like the first future?" Sal knew she didn't fully believe everything, but just having this conversation and showing interest was enough. He spread his hands and said, "The first future happened because you didn't make friends and fell behind in classes. We have no intention of forcing friendship on you, but we want to help as much as we can. If you move with us, the probability of you becoming a hero will be much higher." He waited for her reaction, and she didn't disappoint. Melanie snorted and shook her head. "I thought you two were a weird couple trying to recruit me into a threesome or something. Seriously, until a few minutes ago, I thought this was the most elaborate pickup line of my life. But honestly, hearing that I become an incredible killer in the future doesn't make me feel too bad." Divinity burst into musical laughter and pointed at Sal. "Tell me honestly, which is worse? Hearing you might become a disaster to the world, or getting hit on at a party?" Melanie pretended to ponder, then looked at Sal and squinted slightly. "Getting hit on is definitely worse." Sal protested with a bewildered face, flustered. Hey, wait a minute. I didn't do anything. You called me over first, don't you remember?" Laughing, he raised both hands and stood up from his seat. "Want something to drink? Shall I get you some?" The two picked up their plastic cups from the floor to indicate they were fine. Sal bowed his head playfully in farewell. "See you later then." Before he went down the stairs, Divinity called out to him, "Give my regards to Victoria." Divinity laughed with mischievous eyes and waved Sal away. Shaking his head, Sal looked around the circular auditorium. The evening air was cool, but the atmosphere was excited and warm. Hundreds of freshmen were sitting in groups in the stands, laughing and chatting, and music and lights blended on the central stage, heightening the mood. Sal recognized Hannah, dancing with a few others in the middle. On one side, a male student was handing out cups, and students were lined up holding their cue cards. Curious, Sal approached that way to see what was going on. But a few groups near the stairs went quiet as soon as they saw Sal, and he felt strange. Turning his gaze, he soon found a reason. The nameless female, student sitting at the center with her arms crossed, was a face Sal could never forget. For a moment, Sal thought about paying that girl to heal Kane, but that was a ridiculous expectation, because he had clearly ruined that relationship with his own hands. Rather than ignoring her and passing by, Sal nodded to her with a smile and walked downstairs. "Yeah, late is better than not coming at all." Hannah shouted from the circular auditorium stage, and Sal slowed his steps to look at her. Wearing a form-fitting blue dress, Hannah was dancing with a plastic cup in her right hand. Her blonde hair fell to one side, covering half of her face, but her bright smile was still clearly visible. The music was fast-paced, but she rode the rhythm with contrasting sensual movements, and Sal suddenly felt memories of that night resurfacing. He coughed awkwardly once, then looked away and approached the line gathered around an unfamiliar face. The chatter of the students sounded strangely comforting, whether it was because everyone was wearing casual clothes or because everyone looked happy. For this moment, everything was just good, and Sal felt oddly happy to be a part of it. Stepping closer to the front of the line, he saw the man at the front pouring water into a plastic cup. Then, using his essence, he changed the color of the water and handed the cup to the waiting student. The student immediately held out a card to pay. Sal blinked. Selling drinks made with an ability? With hundreds of people in line, and the minimum transaction is 1 Q credit? That's incredible. Sal couldn't help but admire the creativity. If he had transformed a large water tank at once, he would have saved essence, but he might have missed out on sales opportunities. That might be why this man was using his ability cup by cup. As the line shortened, Sal gradually changed his mind. He decided not to drink alcohol. He hadn't eaten properly all day, and he was worried he might get drunk and recklessly spend his Q credits. Looking around, conversely, quite a few students seemed to have drunk their fill. The center of the dance floor was a mess of crude hip gyrations, and thanks to that, the sober students were leaving one by one to avoid it. "What can I get you?" "It's 1 credit per cup." It was a familiar and natural line. The smile accompanying it was practiced, and even the hand gesture pointing to the drink combination sign next to him was smooth. Sal scanned the sign briefly and ordered a cup of water. A hint of disappointment flashed across the man's face. Rather than embarrassing him, Sal held up his cue card and smiled. "You're taking Jez's administration class, right? That's a really clever idea." As the transaction completed, the impromptu bartender smiled broadly and nodded. "I'm a second year." Surviving Jez's class to the end is tough, but it's totally worth it. Holding his cup of water, Sal left the line and walked around. Hannah was still dancing enthusiastically, but the stage had already been taken over by drunk men. Sal had no intention of giving them any attention, but it was nearly impossible not to hear their drunken voices shouting over the music. While circling the stage once, he was forced to hear about 3 or 4 ridiculous pickup lines. What Hannah heard was a guy boasting about having many connections in the guild world, saying he would take care of her after graduation. He also heard another girl being told she would be invited to the second-year showcase. Taking a sip of water, Sal watched the men making a fuss over the women and spouting all sorts of promises. Hannah rolled her eyes at those men and glanced at Sal, and he smiled and moved on. Looking up towards the stairs above the stage, he saw people gathered, and the atmosphere was simply relaxed and peaceful. Sal wasn't usually one to come out to places like this. Although he had friends who enjoyed socializing, that kind of atmosphere wasn't Sal's taste, including places like clubs where music thumped loudly. Since he was young, Sal had often attended charity events or balls with his parents. If it was a large event, even slightly related to the auction house, they were always invited to flashy places, the kind of places a real hero would never set foot in. The spaces where rich people voiced their opinions loudly sickened Sal, and he never wanted to go to such places again. Lost in such thoughts, he didn't even notice the music changing to a faster tempo. What caught Sal's attention was the sudden sensation of 2 hands covering his eyes from behind. The hands were warm, and the unexpected touch startled him. Just as he was about to turn around, a gentle scolding came. No, you have to guess who it is. Professor Sinclair? Sal answered with a deliberately scared voice, and Hannah burst into laughter, releasing her hands from his eyes. Can you save me by any chance? On the stage, second years were awkwardly tangled together dancing. What was more embarrassing was that the entire group consisted of men. Every one of them was trying to sneak glances at Hannah. Seeing them boldly appear at an event meant only for first years and acting so cluelessly, there was no need to think further about them. Sal didn't want to get involved with them. He shook his head slightly at Hannah, but Hannah didn't give up. She grabbed Sal's arm and pulled him toward the stage. I picked this song. I know you're a good dancer. Her eyes sparkled as she pulled his arm harder. Just as Sal was about to make a vague excuse, a bold second year approached and put a hand on Sal's shoulder. Why don't you dance with me, babe? If making me jealous was the plan, it worked. Hannah looked at the man as if she were seeing him for the first time, then said firmly, No thanks, I've already made up my mind. Let's go, Sal. She confidently pushed through the crowd of drunk men and walked into the center of the stage. Then she spun around on her toes, making Sal's arm wrap around her waist. Her shoulders slipped under his chest, and she tilted her head back to look up at him with a smile. I told you you'd regret it, didn't I? Sal sighed softly and laughed. Holding her hand, he spun her under his arm. You said we'd bury everything we talked about that night, but to use it like this. He moved lightly across the stage, gliding to match her pace. Their bodies entangled and unraveled as if they were one. Hannah's dress fluttered softly with every turn, and Sal's waist moved smoothly in time with her rhythm. Sal glanced at her sideways and said, Is this what you wanted? Hannah turned and flowed with the music, bursting into laughter. Her gaze kept returning to Sal, and Sal playfully pretended to throw her away before dramatically pulling her back, spinning her around his arm. As Sal spun his body, he saw the men around them stepping back one by one. They flinched as if afraid of getting swept up in her spin. From a distance, it must have looked like Sal was throwing Hannah like a weapon and pulling her back. His quick footwork must have also played a part in making the drunk men even more nervous. Sal led Hannah to the center of the stage, fluidly circling her and leading the dance. His legs flashed left and right in perfect harmony with her movements, and Hannah, wearing a breathless, beautiful smile, moved flowingly to Sal's guidance. Her gaze moved between steps, measuring the distance, adjusting her body's direction, and entrusting herself to Sal. But Sal was testing Hannah. Since Hannah had opened Pandora's box first, it couldn't be closed again now. Sal vowed to make sure she would never bring up dancing again. Salsa, of course, but also tango and foxtrot, dances he had learned countless times at balls. Swing dancing on a stage like this surrounded by drunks was all too easy. And yet, Hannah didn't back down at all. Though lacking technical refinement, her tenacity was impressive. Eventually, when the music ended, Hannah gasped for breath, clutching Sal's sweater, her eyes sparkling. You went easy on me just now, didn't you? Sal realized in that moment that he had been outplayed. She had a look on her face that said she would challenge him again soon. Just as he was about to answer, applause erupted from the entire circular auditorium. Sal looked around in surprise. Students were whistling and clapping from various spots in the stands. Sal raised his hand awkwardly in greeting and walked toward the stairs at the edge of the stage. Hannah walked beside him, her arm naturally linked with his. Foxy bitch. At someone's muttered words, Sal turned his head, and there stood the second-year male student who had spoken, with 2 guys behind him. What did you just say? Sal gave the opponent a chance to back down, but drunk on alcohol and the presence of his friends, the guy spoke even more openly. I thought you were a fox, but looking closer. He pointed at Hannah, who was linking arms with Sal. Maybe you're something worse? He took out his cue card from his pocket. How much do you need, babe? You're still a first year, right? How about 10 cue credits? Buy yourself something tasty. His laughter burst out loudly like a hyena, and his friends giggled along with him. Hannah's grip on Sal's arm tightened, but he could barely feel it. Sal took a step forward. Are you serious? You're saying crap like that just because she didn't dance with you? Hannah let go of Sal's arm and stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Sal, just stop. Her voice was weaker than usual. At that single phrase, Sal felt a protective instinct surge from deep within his heart. Thinking rationally, fighting 3 second years was definitely not a good choice. But right now, he didn't feel like acting very smart. He was angry. This was a place where first years who had had a tough week gathered to take a brief rest in a feeling of safety. But the second years were trampling on that meaning. Sal centered himself and looked straight at the guy running his mouth in front of him. And he quickly calculated his options. Students training to become heroes. Sal shook his head in disbelief and turned back toward Hannah, with an apologetic smile directed at her. A fight was ultimately the scenario they wanted. There was no point in playing into it. Hannah looked relieved, and Sal was relieved that, at least in her eyes, he had made the right choice. What did you say just now? The second year who had been running his mouth shouted and charged, flames erupting on his right arm. There was an almost beast-like energy in his movement. As Sal flinched, the burning fist bounced off a blue barrier hard. Hannah's hand was trembling minutely, and it was visible that she was struggling to maintain the barrier without her gauntlet. The flames grew fiercer, and the guy sneered. Do you still have the guts to play games? He thrust his head forward, shrugged his shoulders, and took a threatening stance. And his two friends moved to both sides, surrounding Sal and Hannah as if to trap them in the middle. Their intention to block any escape route was obvious, and the smirk on their faces clearly contained intent to attack. Everyone, hey, what do you think you're doing? A soft voice came from the other side of the stage. It was Victoria. As Sal turned his head, she looked straight at the second years and spoke. Do you know how hard Hannah and I worked to prepare this party? It was made for everyone to enjoy, but you guys are ruining it. The effort we put in is going down the drain. Honestly speaking, weren't you guys only invited because one of you who makes drinks is useful? Her words were tinged with irritation and disappointment, and Sal genuinely wondered if Victoria lacked the ability to read the atmosphere. Looking at the second years again, Sal witnessed something unexpected. They were looking at Victoria with expressions mixed with guilt. Victoria continued speaking. Her anger was no longer hidden, but carried plainly in her words. Since I've given up so much, now it's your turn, right? Let's take off our clothes. Weren't you trying to put on a show? There was venom in her words, and Sal only then realized she had been listening to the whole situation. Why? Why don't you try acting like foxes for us two? Come on, smile for the camera. In shock, bordering on astonishment, Sal watched as the students stopped what they were doing one by one and began taking off their clothes on the stage. They all moved according to Victoria's instructions, completely obedient as if trying to satisfy her somehow. Victoria didn't stop. She made them take photos and made them shout their names, grades, and dormitory room numbers loudly so she could report them later. Just when he thought it couldn't get any worse, she ordered the leader of the pack to burn all the clothes. The male student used his ability without hesitation to burn the pile of clothes on one side of the stage, and Victoria released her ability at that exact moment. Reality hit each of them differently. One realized his belongings were burning, and another became aware of his naked body. And the last one realized that everyone was looking at them and laughing. Covering her mouth with her hand, Victoria looked at the student who had insulted Hannah. Indecent exposure on campus, where everyone can see, and in front of innocent female students? How could you? The student hurriedly covered his private parts, jumped off the stage, and ran toward the dormitory. His friends followed behind him, and seeing them off with a round of applause filling the circular auditorium. When they had completely disappeared, Victoria turned to the audience and raised her hand high, showing 3 cue cards. Drinks are on them tonight.